Hey, there we go. All right, today we're going to be talking about writing in second person. Now, this may not be something that any of you necessarily want to do, but if not, that is perfectly fine. I am simply talking about it because it can sometimes be fun to experiment in other points of view and other types of writing. And writing in second person really, in some ways, is a whole new type of writing. With writing in first person versus writing in third person, it's kind of more just different kind, different flavor of writing. Whereas writing in second person takes it to a whole different medium. It's like working with watercolors in darker colors and lighter colors versus working with acrylics. They're still in the same genre on the same level, it's painting, but it changes entirely how you work with it because the medium's different. So first person tends to give us that like fresh, very intimate look at the character, hence why I compared it to brighter watercolors. It kind of gives you those reds and oranges, has a lot of passion, has a lot of inner thought. Whereas third person gives us a lot more of that kind of almost darker watercolor feel, where it's a lot more of those muted emotions. You see a lot more of the setting, you see a lot more of the sunsets, you see a lot more of the whole picture instead of just inside their mind. As a result, it's a lot more calm typically. And even if you have a lot of exciting things going on, you see it from an outside point of view, so you're kind of like, okay, I'm good. Even if it's third person limited, it feels a little bit more step back. Um, then you have second person. Like I said, it's like working with acrylic. It's a whole different beast. Speaking of acrylic, I have paint on my hands. But you can probably tell where the metaphor came from. But with working in second person, there are a lot of things you want to take into account, namely how your story is going to go. Because there are really only two kinds of maybe there's more, maybe people just haven't explored more. But these are mainly the two types when it comes to second person. You, yours, you do this, you feel this, etc. Self-insert stories and choose your own stories. Self-insert stories is where you have a lot more freedom because of the fact that the person's like, hey, this is me being inserted into this, not necessarily do that as a person, but me in this universe. Almost like looking at yourself in the eyes of the multiverse and saying, like, if I was theoretically dating Spider-Man, what would I do? And so as a result, your brain kind of has to go to that other place of, okay, well, I may not do this, but other me would totally do this. And that's where you get the self-insert thing. This is a lot more fan fiction based, but theoretically someone could publish a novel doing it. But it is very fan fiction kind of feeling in the regard that typically, like I said, you're dating Spider-Man, you fell in love with Captain America, that kind of stuff. Or alternatively, it can be something entirely crazy where it's like you end up in Hermione's body or something like that. So lots of self-insert stuff ends up being fan fiction, but you could honestly probably publish something like this. It would be difficult because the publishing world isn't really built for self-insert stories, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that you would definitely have a little bit of an uphill battle when it came to publication. Boundaries of writing, that's when publishers go, I don't know how I feel about this. There's a lot of novels like that out there where they were the first in their genre or the first person to do this or the first person to do that, and people kind of looked at it and went, I don't know, it's scary. They liked it, but they were like, it's scary because as a publishing company, you like going with what sells, right? And so even if you like it, you're like, I don't know if it will sell though. So it's scary. So if you do decide to do this, let me know. Just know that it will be an interesting venture. This is more classic. This sells. This has a market. This is something people are familiar with and love. Choose your own stories. This one is a lot more complicated to write because of the fact that you truly are letting them be their own person. Because of the fact that you give, well, mostly. I say mostly because I've tried writing choose your own stories with my friends, and 99% of the time they're like, what if option 12? And I'm like, I don't have an option 12. um, but it's as close to being a choose your own story as it can be. Kind of where you're like, oh no, you're being chased by spies down an alleyway, and you realize that you have two options: to jump over the gate or hide behind the trash cans. And then you put it at the bottom of the page. What do you choose to do? Hide behind the trash cans or jump over the gate? And then you have flip to page 26 if you jump over the gate, or alternatively flip to page 2 if you decide to hide behind the trash cans. And that makes it so that way they can choose where they want to go and where they would like to be. And so it feels a little bit more real because it's almost like they are living this adventure, right? They are living this story. And the trick with these is there's a lot of various factors, which is why I wanted to talk about it today, because these are important things to take into consideration when it comes to your readers and how they feel. A lot of second person writing is taking the reader's emotions into account, which is good to learn about. Writing a third person or first person, the reader's emotions are still going to come into play, just not quite as center stage. Typically, the reader's emotions are going to be more backstage on a third person or first person novel, whereas a second person novel, they are the main character, right? So they are front and center. So with self-insert characters, let me scroll through my notes to make sure I'm at the right spot. All right. So we're going to talk about self-insert first because it's a little more tricky. Well, it's actually a little less tricky. Depends on how you look at it. So writing self-insert stuff where you're saying like, hey, you reader, you get to be in this story. This is a little bit tricky because you have to find the balance between alternate universe them, where you just take over and make decisions, and also thinking about what type of reader would be reading this. So you want to think about, okay, so what type of person would want to fall in love with Captain America? Well, this is the type of person I think they'd want to be. And think about what they want to be too, because if I was actually like drawn into a spy plot, I'd probably be dead. They would shoot me. I'd be dead. But what would I want to be? I'd want to be awesome, right? I want to secretly know karate and kick their butts, you know? Like, that's what I want to have. And so with these self-insert ones, it's a trick between balancing what they actually would do as a real person and what they would want to do. Because you don't want to make them too overpowered, because then it feels too unrealistic. But you also don't want to make them too normal, because then they're like, oh, this is just me. This is just normal me. Because I don't know about you guys, but even if we love ourselves and love our lives, there are some things about ourselves we wish we could change, and that's the beauty of self-inserts. You get to make yourself a little cooler, a little bit more amazing in your own eyes. With that being said, there are a few things that you need to avoid, and that is forcing too many emotional descriptions. Try to let the reader infer those for themselves. And this is a great example of where to show, not tell, which is great for third person and first person writing as well. Because of the fact that there's a lot of times in first person and third person writing, he's gorgeous. And it's like, okay, tell us why he's gorgeous. Active. Why do we care? And with self-insert, really extra have to do that, because if you say he's gorgeous because he's, 6'5" and Latino, and someone's like, I actually prefer African American, or whatever, then you're gonna have a problem because your reader's gonna be like, that's actually not my preferred, or someone else. I like Captain America style men, like like big and buff and strong, and then you have this like very lanky, suave dancer man. That's not really what they're looking for, right? And so you kind of have to find this balance between what the reader wants and what you would like them to feel. And so kind of helping instill those feelings in them. They might like brunettes, they might like blondes, they might like who knows what they like. Maybe they like redheads. You don't know. But what you can do is amp up the attractive qualities. So do they have a wonderful smile? Most women, doesn't matter what race or hair color or anything, if they have a great smile, they are like, hey, I like that. And so with self-inserts and with choose your own stories, you can do a lot of that where you say like, hey, they have a fantastic smile, or they have a glint in their eyes, and things like that. So traits and qualities that people would find attractive, irregardless of race, gender, etc. Granted, you are going to run into some people who are going to open the book and be like, meh, and close the book. But you're also going to run into a lot of people that if you open it up a little more, they are going to be more open to it. If you keep it very closed and you're like, only people who like Latino men can like this novel, you're going to run into some problems. The other problem you're going to run into with self-insert and choose your own is you cannot describe the main character because it's them, right? You cannot say they are 20 years old African American woman. Well, I'm not a 20-year-old African American woman, so I can't read this book now. That makes me sad. You know, what if I want to enjoy this book? What if I want to enjoy a self-insert fan fiction about being a spy? So you want to avoid physical descriptions for the you/yours for the reader. You can still describe things though. Like you can say you fall and you hit your knee and it's bleeding everywhere. You know, that's still a description without saying skin color, without saying gender, without saying eye color. And you can also describe what they're doing without describing any of those features too. You can say their eyes glance to the side or things like that in third person, or in that you say your eyes glance to the side, barely noticing, you know, the rustle in the leaves or something like that. You don't have to describe them. I know that's hard because in third person and first person we're always told describe your characters. But if you are doing a character that's different than you telling the reader this is you. All right. So, next thing we're going to talk about is choose your own stories. All right, so with choose your own stories, the main problem you're going to run into here is your plot is going to get incredibly complex. So, what are we going to do about this complexity of plot? Especially if you're doing like historical stuff, like you got blasted into the past and you're now in the 1950s. That's going to drastically change things, right? You don't want to, like we talked about last week with historical fiction, you don't want to info dump, especially because if people are reading a choose your own story / self-insert in the 1950s, they probably already know a lot about the 1950s. You probably don't need to tell them every single little detail about the 1950s. With choose your own stories, though, the beauty of the complexity is that you don't have to choose just one plot. I know that sometimes you guys might run into that situation where you're like, well, I really want to do this, but what if the character wants to do this? Do both. You're now allowed to do both. With the choose your own story, you can say, hey, well, I really want them to become a spy, so I'm going to have this plot. But then you can say, ooh, but what if they decide instead to fall in love with this fantasy vampire dude? You can have it all. You can have all the options. Although I will say most people typically pick a plot and then just decide various fates. So they'll say like, it's the zombie apocalypse. So there's no fantasy or anything. It's just sci-fi zombie apocalypse. And then they'll say things like, okay, now try to survive the zombie apocalypse. And you'll actually have several endings where you die. I've read a few of those, and it's depressing. Where I'm like, I'm making all the right decisions, and then it's like, and a zombie clubs you in the head. Aw. And then you're all sad, and then you're like, okay, I gotta go back to that other chapter and make a better choice. um, so with the beauty of choose your own stories is that you get so much more complexity. But keeping it all straight can be hard, right? I would say typically when doing a choose your own story, try mapping it out using sticky notes or a notebook or something else first, something physical, so that way if you need to rearrange it, you can rearrange it, especially because of the whole flipping pages things, right? So I would also say what's your main plot going to be and what's your side plot and your third or fourth even side plot going to be. Because if you, for instance, have a choice here where it's like, hey, go upstairs or downstairs, and downstairs leads to death, then you probably want to write that one first because it'll be shorter. And then you'll be like 15 pages long, and then you'll be like, great, now I can go back and say on page 26 or whatever, and go back and be like, now if you go upstairs, go to page 26 because there's longer stuff. That was also the cheat in Choose Your Own Stories, is sometimes you knew if it was a further page back, you probably lasted longer. But with those kinds of things, it's incredibly important to remember mainly what's important in actual third person and first person stories too, which is the reader. how's the reader going to feel? And yes, sometimes you just have to say, I'm sorry, reader, but I'm going to make this choice and you're going to not like it, like killing off your favorite thing like that. But at the same time, taking your reader into account is important. How many TV shows have been canceled because someone made a decision and you went, I'm sorry, I'm not watching it anymore. And so did 1,000 other people. Have you ever had TV shows like that or movies like that where you're watching along and you're like, this is great. And then the writers made a decision and you're like, I'm out. My favorite character just died. I can't do this anymore. Like, yes, having your characters die happens. But at the same time, if you're not careful, you're going to make your reader very, very upset. You need to learn how far your reader can be pushed before they leave. It's no different than boring your reader. How far can you go in normal, everyday plot stuff or drama or action or anything before the reader puts down the book? That's the trick here, is having the reader not put the book down. And the hardest part about not putting the book down is being able to get into the mind of that reader. Now, the one cheat code that you can use here is that if you would want to read that book, your reader will probably want to read that book. So think about, would this make me put the book down? When you're writing it, think, okay, if I was reading this and this character got killed, would I straight up give up on this book and say, nope, I'm done? Or would you want to keep reading? Would you want to keep finding things out? There are a lot of things like that. For instance, there was a TV show that I liked that I actually wanted to keep watching it purely because the side characters were so cute. I was like, okay, main character's life sucks. That sucks. But the side characters are adorable. And I love their relationship. So I kept watching. Eventually, they started ruining the side characters' relationship too. And I was like, everyone's life sucks. I can't do this. But that's why you gotta learn how to gauge what are they staying for? What are the readers staying in the book for? And this is why beta readers are so incredibly helpful, because of the fact that beta readers can help you know that. Now, every once in a while, you're going to get a squirrely beta reader who's like, add more romance. And everyone's like, I actually really loved it. No need to add romance. Yes, but they're the outliers. No different than graphing data in your math class. I'm sorry to bring up math for those of you who hate math, but but they are truly the outliers. With beta readers, you will have some outliers. You'll ask them like, hey, what should I add to this story? Do you think the story's good at it, good as is? Blah, blah. And you'll have every once in a while someone go, no, I absolutely hated it because you killed off this character. And then you'll have like 99% of everyone else go, because you killed off that character, it gave the whole story more meaning. And so you never really truly know until you pitch it to an audience. You got to think about it, but audience pitching is important. Do you guys have any questions about writing in second person slash catering to your readers? Kind of as a sub lesson here, because really that's what second person is all about, is about catering to that reader. Yes.
Well, I feel like a big problem is trying to balance between making readers happy but also kind of infuriating them. Because I used to write a lot of books about where it'd just be like wish fulfillment, be like my character has the best life.
Yes.
She has everything under control. But
Yes.
I feel like it's also really good to make things tough for the characters.
Absolutely.
Make things tough for the readers. So how do you find like a balance?
Yes. So that's kind of why I mentioned the knowing how to push them to the limits, because I agree. If you have nothing going wrong, then it can also make the readers put the book down because they're going like, okay, my life isn't that perfect, and the fact that her life is perfect is kind of annoying me. You know, I completely agree with you. That was a very excellent insight. So having difficulties is very much a part of it. I would say the tricky part about this is there's no exact formula. I can't just give you this is the perfect silver bullet answer kind of thing, the magical cure. But what I can say is think again about what would make you put the book down. What is too far for you? If, for example, I killed off this character and you were like, I can't read this book anymore, probably don't do that. But if you're also like, I killed off this character, but because of this, she becomes this awesome bad A who takes vengeance, you know, that makes you want to read more, right? So it's kind of tricky knowing how far to push them. I would also say keep in mind cycles of 3 if you're doing try and fail cycles. because try and fail cycles are also incredibly important and kind of relates to what you're talking about. If life's all perfect and amazing all the time, that's not really life. um, so I would say with try and fail cycles, I'd say have at least try and fail cycles in batches of 3. And I do say batches of 3 because, for example, if you're getting new superpowers and you just learn in like 3 different strikes how to use them, that's not very realistic. Whereas if you're like, okay, I tried it 3 times and I failed all 3 times, I'm gonna take a break. I tried it 3 times and I succeeded once this time, and then I tried 3 times and I succeeded twice this time. Or alternatively, they just continue failing until they finally pull it all together. There are lots of different ways to do this. You can have it amp up where they're slowly getting more successful, or you can just have it be like they're continuing to fail, and then for some reason something flips it around. Like the TV show I was watching recently had something similar where this guy was supposed to find his calm center, in order to learn the best art of kung fu and kick this master's butt. Um, but ultimately, he had to learn that that was actually messing him up big time because of the fact that he actually had no calm. He was kind of like the Hulk. He had no calm. And so his calm center was actually becoming enraged. And he was able to kick the guy's butt by becoming thoroughly enraged. And so sometimes it's also about like trying to find the right thing. So you can have fun moments like that where it's like, okay, we think that we're doing it the right way, but the reason he's failing is because we're not doing it the right way. It's because we keep trying the wrong thing and we need to try something else. So, excellent question. There's a variety of different ways that you can deal with that. I would definitely say do not have their life be fully perfect, then there's no plot. Plot comes from when bad things happen, which kind of sucks, but it is also the beauty of writing, and in some ways the beauty of reading, right? We get to see all these characters struggle through these incredibly hard things, and we go, you know what? If Percy Jackson can make it through high school while also fighting monsters and almost dying, I can do it too. I don't have to even fight monsters. You know? It's kind of inspiring to us, and it helps us believe that we can do more than we can do, and it helps us to feel that we have a friend who is suffering alongside us, even if they're not going through the same things. That's why people love books so much. Any other questions regarding readers or writing in second person? Okay. All right, then I'm going to turn off the video for today. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Reminder that we have the writing contest coming up. It is not due until May 31st, though. I have sent contest entry forms via the email. The physical paper copies of those forms will be made available coming in March. But as of right now, you only have digital copies, which you can print yourself. But if you want a printed copy from here, it won't be available till March. But feel free to think about it. Let me know if you need any help with anything. And again, as always, feel free to suggest a lesson or suggest something else that you would like to talk about. And can't think of anything else for today. All right, I'm going to turn off the video and let me know if you guys have any questions.